Mr. Philp, thank you for joining talkTV. Can I ask you what your reaction to the defection of Mr. Poulter is going across to the Labour Party? That's surely a blow for your party.
Good morning, Peter. Not particularly. I think our record on the NHS is a very good one. Record levels of spending, £165 billion a year, even adjusting for inflation. It's never been higher. Record numbers of doctors, record numbers of nurses. In just the last year alone, the NHS has added 68,000 workers net. We've got 4,000 more doctors now than a year ago, 7,000 more nurses. The waiting lists are falling following COVID and following
Chris,
the strike.
you've got an NHS doctor who has no faith in your NHS plan, who's previously been elected as a Conservative a number of times. Not exactly a ringing endorsement.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what Dan's motivations are or what his local experience has been, but I'm giving you the national picture. He's claiming that Labour, he's joining Labour. But if you look at where Labour actually run the NHS in Wales, they are doing a terrible job. Every year, tens of thousands of people are having to flee the Labour-run NHS in Wales to get treatment in England. The proportion of the population in Wales suffering from long waits, or indeed on the waiting list at all, is higher than in England. So we've seen that where Labour have control of the NHS, they are doing a terrible, terrible job. I
want to ask you mainly about your own portfolio, policing. Baroness Casey, found the Metropolitan Police to be institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. What urgent action are you taking as Policing Minister to change that?
Well, I don't accept the characterisation as being institutionally racist, etc. But there is certainly work to do to improve significantly police standards. And in the year since the Casey report came out, we have taken decisive action. For example, we have run every single police officer in the country through the police national database to check their background. And there's, I think, a couple of hundred cases where further work is being done, where concerns were identified.
And surely you should have done that in the first place.
So as Police Minister, I initiated that very soon after being appointed, and that has now been done. We've changed the dismissal rules to give Chief Constables, like the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, more power to dismiss officers where there are misconduct issues. We've tightened the vetting guidance. So we've taken a huge number of steps, both in the Home Office, in government, and with policing, to really raise standards and make sure we don't see repeats of some of those awful cases that have been reported in the recent past.
More recently, we have seen the controversy in regard to the pro-Palestinian marches. We have seen a Jewish man being called openly Jewish for simply wanting to cross the road. He was threatened with arrest as well. Is that officer still on the beat?
Well, obviously operational decisions for...
Surely you've asked the Commissioner.
Well, I think he is, as I understand it, but that is an operational decision for Mark Rowley.
Do you support that?
What we've made clear, what the Home Secretary and I have made clear to Sir Mark, is that it is vital that Jewish Londoners can feel safe in London, which means obviously active policing of the protests.
Do you think Jewish Londoners do feel safe in London? Because I'm not sure they do, a lot of them.
Well, that's what. So Jewish Londoners that we've spoken to say that they do feel unsafe at times, and that is not right. Everybody should feel safe in London, whether Jewish or Muslim or any faith or any race. Now, the Met Police have made, I think, across the country, we've made over 500 arrests since these protests have taken place. There were 2 arrests just yesterday in relation to what were essentially anti-Semitic incidents, and we will be working with police to make sure there is a zero-tolerance approach But
the point is, Chris, it's not zero tolerance, is it? There are more than 2 people on those protests yesterday who will have been holding anti-Semitic placards, who will have been doing hugely offensive things like chanting from the river to the sea, who will have been comparing the Israeli government to Nazis, comparing Jewish people to Nazis, deeply, deeply offensive things, far more than 2 of them.
Well, as I say, there have been well over 500 arrests. It may be near 1,000 now since these protests started. And if there is evidence that comes out after the march, for example, video evidence, then the Metropolitan Police or other police forces will obviously investigate and make arrests, as they have done. Any form of anti-Semitic offensiveness, any sort of anti-Muslim hatred, for that matter, deserves to have zero tolerance in this country, and that is the message we are sending very clearly.
It might be the message, but it's not the practicality, is it, Chris Philp? Because the Metropolitan Police is not showing zero tolerance. You may be telling them on a policy basis as Policing Minister to show zero tolerance, but operationally, which is out of your control, that's not happening. Do you have faith in the Commander, Mark Rowley? The Commissioner, I should say, Mark Rowley, because a lot of people don't.
Well, so the Home Secretary has recently, as in last week, I think, made clear that he does have confidence in Mark Rowley. The Prime Minister's said the same thing, provided, of course, that they do deliver that policing operation that is needed to make sure Jewish Londoners and others feel the safety they are entitled.
What time limit are you going to, how long are you going to give him to do that? He's had 6 months already. You're not happy with things at the moment. There was that conditional support. I was in Downing Street at that press conference with Rishi Sunak on Monday where he gave that conditional support. Are you going to give him another 6 months to get his act together?
Look, we're not setting time limits. We're working constructively with the police, with Sir Mark Rowley and others. We were together at the National Policing Board last Thursday. We've got a good working relationship, and we're going to work constructively with the Met to make sure Londoners are kept safe. We're also, of course, putting pressure on Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is the politician primarily responsible for the Metropolitan Police, so he has a number of questions to answer, not just in this regard, but also more broadly. Sadiq Khan has presided over an explosion in knife crime in London. The homicide rate in London is higher than it is elsewhere. So Sadiq Khan has a lot of questions to answer.
Well, so do you. You're the policing minister.
Yeah, that's correct. Responsible for policing across England and Wales, and I've explained what I've been doing in the last year. But Sadiq Khan is the Police and Crime Commissioner for London, and he should be stepping up to the plate in all of these areas. And unfortunately, at the moment, he is not doing so. And Londoners will obviously pass their verdict at the mayoral election next Thursday.
Well, should you take the portfolio away from Sadiq Khan if he's re-elected?
Well, look, we have police and crime commissioners to be held accountable at the ballot box, and what I hope, as a Conservative, what I hope Londoners do next Thursday, in just 4 days' time, is remove Sadiq Khan from office, because he has done a terrible job as London Police and Crime Commissioner. Knife crime through the roof. The Met have missed the forced to miss their recruitment targets. The Met is actually shrinking thanks to Sadiq Khan's ineptitude.
I want to bring you back to the pro-Palestinian marches. Have you, as policing minister, been on the ground to see these marches in terms of how they work? Have you been standing on the street watching them?
So I haven't. I've deliberately chosen not to go on the street because I've been briefed very extensively, but I've deliberately chosen not to go on the street, partly just to not get in the way of what is a difficult policing operation. But I'm kept closely in touch throughout the day.
Couldn't you stand in your office in Parliament, for example, and see them walking past? Have you done that?
Well, I've engaged closely. Engaged closely with Muslim communities in my own constituency in Croydon. Been briefed very extensively, but I don't want to get in the way of the operational.
What about Jewish communities? Are you talking to them as well?
Yes, we are. Yes, absolutely. So we've met extensively with the Community Security Trust. The Home Secretary and I met actually with Gideon Poulter from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism just last Thursday. So we are meeting regularly with people from both communities.
You talked earlier and said that really a lot of the decisions, including the officer who called Mr. Poulter, you mentioned there, openly Jewish, that's an operational decision. At what point do you say, I'm actually going to weigh in on this and say to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, you're not doing your job, and how you should be doing your job, certainly in regard to that officer?
Well, I'm not going to tell the Commissioner what to do with regard to an individual officer, because they are operationally independent. It's not right for politicians of any party to tell the police who to hire and who to fire. However, what I did say publicly, I think it was last weekend, when the video that you're now showing was first broadcast, that I was deeply concerned about the video that you're playing, and that Jewish people, including Mr. Poulter, should be able to walk around in central London without fear of harassment or intimidation. And I think that is a message that has been heard and received by the police.
It's interesting with the police. I mean, you talked about some of those statistics there in London, knife crime and so on. I mean, surely it's up to the operational aspect of the Metropolitan Police to deal with that, as well as the policy side of Sadiq Khan and you as policing minister.
Well, so we've provided the resources to police forces across the country to hire a record ever number of officers, and we hit that target.
And a lot of them are sitting behind desks and they're policing Twitter and they're policing things online. They're not on the beat and they're not dealing with those things like knife crime.
So we've delivered record police numbers. We've also changed the rules around the so-called non-crime hate incidents to reduce the amount of time police basically waste policing Twitter, as you put it. We've transferred lots of the mental health work that police were doing back to the NHS and the ambulance services, who are best placed to do it. That will save over 1 million hours a year of police time. We've made changes to the so-called counting rules, where certain crimes were getting double recorded. That will save nearly 500,000 hours a year of police time. So we've done all of those things. The only police force to have missed its recruitment target of the 43 forces is the Met, even though they were given the money to do it. And that is because Sadiq Khan is incompetent. And not only did the Met, under Sadiq Khan's stewardship...
But surely if it's an operational decision for recruitment, that would be the Met itself. The Met is failing here rather than Sadiq Khan himself.
But it's his job as Police and Crime Commissioner to hold the force to account and to make sure they're taking the right management steps, as every single one of the other 42 Police and Crime Commissioners around the country has done. And to make it even worse, on Sadiq Khan's watch, the number of Met officers has actually gone down in the last year, whereas across the country as a whole, in other forces, it has been largely stable. Okay. That is down to Sadiq Khan as the Police and Crime Commissioner.
I want to ask you what one of our texters has said. This person says it is bizarre that a policing minister would not witness the pro-Palestinian protests firsthand after 6 months of very serious concerns. What would you say to that, Chris Philp?
Well, I've already said I don't want to get in the way of a live operational police operation. I've reviewed these protests with the Met very, very extensively and repeatedly over the last 6 months, and met with representatives of both communities, both the Muslim community and Jewish community, and that I think is the right thing to do. Just
briefly before you go, Chris Philp, and I appreciate you speaking to me this morning, will the Rwanda plan work? Will those flights definitely take off at the start of July?
Yes, I think it will work, and I think it will be immune from legal challenge, although I'm sure there'll be some tussles in the courts. And we can see that it will work because other countries like Australia's Operation Sovereign Borders, which did something quite similar, worked about 10 years ago. And when we did a returns agreement with Albania just over a year ago, where people crossing the channel would get returned to Albania if they were Albanian, we saw the numbers of Albanians go down by 95%. So we've got very clear evidence that the deterrent effect of a scheme like Rwanda does work, and my colleagues on the immigration side of the Home Office, I know, are working to get that implemented as quickly as possible in the next 10 to 12 weeks, as you say.
Chris Philp, Policing Minister, thanks for joining us on Talk. I really appreciate you taking the time.